Let's take a look at the performance appraisal process. Performance appraisal means evaluating an employee's performance relative to standards. Appraisal involves more than forms. It also requires setting performance standards and assumes that the employee receives the training, feedback, incentives, and other things required to eliminate performance deficiency. Stripped to its essentials, performance appraisal always involves the three-step performance appraisal process. First, setting work standards. Second, assessing the employee's actual performance relative to those standards. This often involves some sort of rating form. Third, providing feedback to the employee with the aim of helping him or her to eliminate performance deficiencies or to continue to perform above par. Effective appraisals actually begin before the actual appraisal, with the manager defining the employee's job and performance criteria. Defining the job means agreeing on job duties, standards, and appraisal methods. There are 5 reasons to appraise subordinate or employee performance. Although many employers are replacing or contemplating annual reviews with frequent informal discussions between managers and employees, most base pay, promotion, and retention decisions in large part are based on appraisal. Appraisals play a central role in the employer's performance management process. Performance management means continuously ensuring that each employee's performance makes sense in terms of the company's overall goals. The appraisal lets the manager and subordinate develop plans for correcting deficiencies and to reinforce strength. Appraisals provide an opportunity to review the employee's career plans in light of their strengths and weaknesses. An appraisal enables the supervisor to identify if there's a training need and provide the training required. The performance appraisal should compare what should be with what is. Managers use one or more of 3 bases: goals, job dimensions or traits, and behaviors or competencies to establish ahead of time what the person's performance standard should be. First, the manager can assess to what extent the employee is attaining their numerical goals, such as goals derived from the company's overall profitability, cost reduction, or efficiency. Behavioral science research studies suggest 4 guidelines for setting performance goals. Assign specific goals. Employees who receive specific goals usually perform better than those who don't. Assign measurable goals. Put goals in quantitative terms and include target dates and deadlines. If measurable results won't be available, then satisfactory completion is okay. Assign challenging but doable goals. Goals should be challenging but not so difficult that they appear unrealistic. Encourage participation. Managers often face this question: should I tell my employees what their goals are or let them participate with me in setting the goals? The evidence suggests that they are similarly effective. A second basis upon which to appraise someone is with a form with basic job dimensions or traits such as communication or teamwork. The assumption is that good teamwork is a useful standard for what it should be. A third option is to appraise employees based on their mastery of competencies. Appraisal by the immediate supervisor is still at the heart of most performance management systems. This makes sense. The supervisor is usually in the best position to observe and evaluate subordinate performance and is responsible for that person's performance. The human resource department is generally in an advisory role. They need to train supervisors to improve appraisal skills, monitor the system effectiveness, and ensure that it complies with EEO laws. Relying only on supervisors' appraisal isn't advisable. Peer appraisals are a popular addition. Typically, an employee due for a peer appraisal chooses an appraisal chairperson. The latter, perhaps with the employee's input, then selects a supervisor and several peers to evaluate the employee's work. Peers see aspects of the person that a boss may not see, so peers' opinions can be useful. Knowing your colleagues will appraise you can also change behavior. Using multiple raters is advantageous. It helps cancel out problems such as bias on the part of individual raters and can also help pick up the different facets of an employee's performance observed by different people. Some employers obtain employee self-ratings, usually along with supervisor ratings. The problem, of course, is that the employee usually rates themselves higher than a supervisor. Many employers have subordinates rate their managers, usually for developmental rather than pay purposes. Not surprisingly, anonymity affects feedback. Managers who receive feedback from subordinates who identify themselves view the process more positively. However, subordinates who identify themselves tend to give inflated ratings. With 360-degree feedback, the employer collects performance information all around an employee, from supervisors, subordinates, peers, and internal or external customers, generally for developmental rather than pay purposes. The usual process is to have all raters complete online appraisal surveys. The graphic rating scale is the simplest and most popular method for appraising performance. The scale may list several job dimensions or traits such as communication or teamwork and a range of performance values from below expectations to role model or unsatisfactory to outstanding for each trait. The supervisor rates each subordinate by circling or checking the score that best describes the subordinate's performance for each trait and totals the rating. A competency or skill and behavior-based graphic rating scale is another option. This rating form assesses the person's competency and skill. Some employers use competency-based self-appraisal, with the employee then discussing it with their supervisor. The scale might rate how well the employee did with respect to achieving specific goals. Ranking employees from best to worst on a trait or traits is another option. Since it's usually easier to distinguish between the worst and best employees, an alternation ranking method is most popular. First, list all subordinates to be rated, and then cross out the names of any not known well enough to rank. Then, on a form, indicate the employee who's the highest on performance dimensions being measured and the one who's the lowest. Then, choose the next highest and the next lowest until all employees have been ranked. The paired comparison method makes the ranking method more precise. For every trait, quantity of work, quality of work, and so on, you compare every employee with every other employee. For example, if you had 5 employees to rate, you'd make a chart of all possible pairs of employees for each trait being evaluated. Then, you'd indicate the better employee of each pair with a positive symbol in the chart. Finally, you'd total the number of positive symbols for each employee to determine an overall performance rating. The forced distribution method is similar to grading on a curve. Here, the manager places predetermined percentages of rates into performance categories. Forced distribution's big advantage is preventing supervisors from simply rating all or most employees at the top level. But as students know, with this method, you're either in the top 5 or 10% or you're not. Forced distribution systems may also increase the risk of discriminatory adverse impact. One survey found that 44% of employers said it damages morale. Forced distribution motivates effort and perhaps performance, but leaves many employees feeling that their appraisals were dysfunctional. Distinguishing between top and bottom performers is usually not even the problem. The challenge is to differentiate meaningfully between the other 80%. With the critical incident method, the supervisor keeps a log of examples of behaviors. Every 6 months or so, supervisors and subordinates meet to discuss the latter's performance, using the incidents as examples. One study involved 112 first-line supervisors. The conclusion of this and similar studies is that compiling critical incidents as they occur anchors the evaluative appraisal in reality and improves appraisal outcomes. So keeping a diary of incidents provides examples the supervisor can use to explain the person's rating. It also makes the supervisor think about the subordinate's appraisal all year long. The downside is that such incidents don't produce relative ratings for pay raise purposes. All or part of the written appraisal may be done in narrative form. Here, the person's supervisor assesses their past performance and required areas of improvement. The supervisor's narrative helps the employee understand how to improve. A behaviorally anchored rating scale is an appraisal tool that gives examples of performance. Developing a bars typically involves these 5 steps. First, write critical incidents. Ask the job or job holders and supervisors to write specific illustrations, critical incidents of effective and ineffective performance on the job. Develop performance dimensions. Have these people cluster the incidents into 5 or 10 performance dimensions, such as sales skills. Then, to verify these groupings, have another team who also knows the job reallocate the original critical incidents to the cluster they think it fits best. The second group then rates the behavior described by the incident as to how effectively or ineffectively it represents performance on the dimension. Then, choose about 6 or 7 of the incidents as performance dimensions to determine behavioral anchors. The bars method has several advantages. Most notably, the critical incidents along the scale illustrate what to look for in terms of superior, average, and poor performance. They also make it easier to explain the ratings to appraisees. Management by Objectives, or MBO, refers to a multi-step goal-setting and appraisal program. MBO requires the manager to set specific, measurable, organizationally relevant goals with each employee, and then periodically discuss the latter's progress towards these goals. First, establish a company-wide plan for the next year and set goals. Then, department heads and their supervisors jointly set goals for departments. Department heads discuss the department goals with their subordinates and ask them to develop their own individual goals. Department heads and their subordinates set short-term performance targets for each employee. After a period, department heads compare each employee's actual and expected results. Department heads hold periodic performance review meetings with subordinates. Here, they discuss the subordinate's performance and make any plans for rectifying or continuing the person's performance. Formal MBO programs require numerous, time-consuming meetings, and their use has diminished dramatically. Employers use forms, software, or cloud-based systems to conduct appraisals. Many smaller employers use hard copy forms available from vendors such as Staples and HR Direct. Forms are simple to use but become time-consuming as headcount rises. Computerization expedites appraisals. With one package, the manager sees a graphic rating scale with behaviorally anchored examples. Then they choose the best phrase, and the employee appraiser generates the appraisal with the sample text. Most computerized appraisal packages today include modules to help assist managers and employees in developing and improving performance results. Electronic performance monitoring systems allow managers to monitor employees. EPM can improve productivity, but also seems to raise employee stress. However, one researcher concludes that electronic performance monitoring represents the future of performance feedback. Supervisors can electronically monitor the amount and quality of an employee's work and what they produce, and have objective indicators of employee performance immediately available and visible. Similarly, some employers track workers' performance through wearable devices. Instead of once-a-year performance reviews, consider semi-annual conversation days. These stress the manager-employee conversation in areas for improvement and growth, and on setting stretch goals that align with the employee's career interests. There are no explicit performance ratings in this type of system. How do organizations go about deciding which appraisal tool to use? In practice, most use a rating form that merges several approaches. There are systematic errors in judgment that occur when people evaluate each other. The unclear standards problem occurs when the rating scale seems objective. For example, different supervisors might define good performance, fair performance, and so on differently. Experts define the halo effect as the influence of a rater's general impression of ratings on specific ratee qualities. For example, supervisors often rate unfriendly employees lower on all traits rather than just who gets along with others. Central tendency means rating all employees average. Other supervisors tend to rate their employees high or low. This strictness or leniency problem is especially severe with graphic rating scales. Recency means letting what the employee has done recently blind you to what his or her performance has been throughout the year. The main solution to addressing these errors is to accumulate critical incidents all year long. Bias is the tendency to allow individual differences such as age, race, and sex affect the performance ratings of employees. Biased appraisals have various causes. One is rater personality. For example, raters who score higher on conscientiousness tend to give their peers lower ratings. They were stricter, in other words. Performance ratings amplify the quality of the personal relationship between boss and employee. Good relationships tend to create good performance appraisal experiences, and bad ones create bad relationships. Unfortunately, subordinates' demographic traits, their age, race, gender, and so on, also affect ratings. For example, it's often argued that a glass ceiling largely explains the few women in top management jobs. One study concluded that all else being equal, an evaluator will provide a lower performance evaluation to a female subordinate with stronger competence signals compared to a female subordinate with weaker competence signals. In other words, the better a female employee is in terms of her actual performance and her educational and work experience, the more likely it is that she'll be rated lower. Unless employers guard against such bias, they could be condoning biased promotion and pay decisions against some of their highest performing and highest potential employees. Bias is one reason to use multiple raters in the process. Many appraisals are unfair. In practice, the quality of the interpersonal relationship between the supervisor and the employee will shape the appraisal's impact. Supervisors should be trained in both the technical and interpersonal aspects of appraising employees and giving feedback. They should understand how to build trust, engage in continuous performance conversations, diagnose and productively address performance issues, and deliver and react to feedback constructively. Employers should have clear expectations, understand the basis on which you're going to appraise them, and the appraisal should be objective. Employers should evaluate managers based on their effectiveness in managing performance. Periodic appraisals typically culminate in an appraisal interview. Here, the manager and the subordinate review the appraisal and make plans to remedy deficiencies and reinforce strengths. These interviews are often uncomfortable. Few people like to receive or give negative feedback. Adequate preparation and effective implementation are essential. Supervisors face 4 types of appraisal situations, each with its unique objective. The satisfactory or promotable is the easiest interview. The person's performance is satisfactory and the promotion looms. Your objective is to develop specific development plans. The satisfactory, not promotable interview is for employees whose performance is satisfactory but for whom promotion is not possible. The best option is to find incentives that maintain performance, such as extra time off, a small bonus, or recognition. When the person's performance is unsatisfactory but correctable, the interview objective is to lay out an action or development plan for correcting unsatisfactory performance. Dismissal is often a useful option. When necessary, criticize in a manner that lets a person maintain dignity. Provide examples of critical incidents and specific suggestions. Avoid once a year critical broadsides by giving feedback periodically so that the formal review contains no surprises. Criticism should be objective and free of personal bias. The aim of the appraisal should be to improve unsatisfactory performance and to reinforce exemplary performance. The appraisal should result in a plan for what the employee must do to improve their efforts. The employee's performance may be so weak that it requires a written warning. Such warnings serve to shake your employee out of their bad habits and to help you defend your rating to your own boss if needed and to the courts or other third-party audiences. Written warnings should list the employee's standards, make it clear that the employee was aware of the standard, and specify any deficiencies relative to that standard. Written warnings show that the employee had an opportunity to correct their performance. Managers can use the appraisal interview to improve employees' engagement. Employees who understand how they and their department contribute to the company's success are more engaged. Show employees how their efforts contribute to the big picture. Another study found that engagement rose when employees perceived that their role in the organization was worthwhile and valuable. Use the interview to emphasize the meaningfulness to the organization of what the employee is doing. Employees who experience psychological safety are more candid and objective, but also are more supportive and operate without unnecessarily undermining employees' self-image. Efficacy drives engagement, so use the interview to make sure your employee has what he or she needs to do a good job. Involvement in decision making and letting the employee voice their opinions improve employee engagement. Use the interview to show your employee that you listen to their ideas and value their contribution. Engagement rises when employees have an opportunity to improve their careers. During the interview, discuss the person's evaluation in the context of where they see their career heading. Make sure that the interviewee views the appraisal and remedial actions as fair. Management experts have long argued that most performance appraisals neither motivate employees or guide their development. Some proponents of total quality management argue for eliminating performance appraisals altogether. Total Quality Management, or TQM programs, are organization-wide programs that integrate all functions and processes of a business. All aspects of the business, including design, planning, production, distribution, and field service, are aimed at maximizing customer satisfaction through continuous improvement. Some of the principles include ceasing dependence on inspections, aiming for continuous improvement, initiating extensive training, driving out fear to work effectively, and instituting a program of self-improvement. Basically, TQM advocates argue that organizations is a system of interconnected parts that all matter to one another. In comparing performance management and a performance appraisal, the distinction is the contrast between a year-end event and a year-long process of performance planning integral to the way people are managed throughout the year. Performance management is the continuous process of developing individuals and teams. We can summarize performance management's 6 basic elements as follows. Direction sharing means communicating the company's goals to all employees and then translating the goals into department, team, and individual goals. Goal alignment means having a method that enables managers and employees to see the link between the employees' goals and those of their department and organization. Ongoing performance monitoring usually means computerized systems to continually measure a team or employee's progress towards meeting performance goals. Ongoing feedback means providing face-to-face and computerized continuous feedback regarding progress towards goals. Coaching and development support should be part of this feedback process. Recognition and reward should provide incentives to keep employees' performance on track. The trend today is to provide real-time feedback on performance. For example, GE began using a smartphone app it calls Pledge to let supervisors assess employees continuously rather than once a year. IBM Corporation introduced a new app-based performance review that it calls Checkpoint. It allows for more continuous monitoring of performance and feedback. Goldman Sachs still uses annual reviews, but added a new system through which employees get continuous feedback. Goldman also compiles 360-degree feedback on all of its employees. Morgan Stanley no longer uses numerical appraisal ratings, instead emphasizing qualitative feedback. Performance management doesn't mean a company can't be tough, and these examples show that strong performance management is really a development process that an organization invests in to ensure that people, teams, and the organization can be their best. Technology isn't mandatory for managers to manage performance well. What is mandatory is having the right managerial philosophy and on-the-job behaviors. As a philosophy, performance management reflects non-threatening TQM principles such as aim for continuous improvement, institute extensive training, and drive out fear so that everyone can work effectively. The manager's behavior should include linking employee goals to organizational goals, giving employees continuous feedback, providing required resources and coaching, and rewarding good performance. Managers should remember that employees' performance reflects more than whether they're motivated.